the conference Discord, because it is popping. And we'll put up our slide deck after this, and something that we should tell you, we have a slide deck, and we'd love a discussion, but if you don't feel like discussing, don't worry about it, because we'll fill up the dead air. Don't worry about that. We will.
We came prepared for all levels of engagement.
We have like 60 slides. So if you guys don't want to discuss, we'll just keep going through it. And so please, questions, comments, everything you feel like doing. So Chris, I guess you can pull up the slide deck, which will lead us through.
Go ahead and exit the Brady Bunch screen, and then we will hop over to our slides.
And while we put it as emerging issue discussion, this is not an emerging issue. Okay, people have been discussing this for years. We put emerging issue, so if the terms weren't really familiar to people, they could think that we were just having this discussion for the first time, but we're not. I will tell you, this is based off research we're doing in our PhD programs, and also I think the first presentation we did on something like data justice and digitalization was in 2018, probably.
Yeah.
So these are points that we would love to discuss more. So Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, sure. My name is Chris Luchs. I am the Associate Dean of Career Technical Education and Mathematics at CCC Online here in Colorado. And I am also a doctoral student in the Community College Leadership Program at Old Dominion University in Virginia.
And I'm Kay Novak. I'm an instructional designer, also out of Colorado. And I'm a PhD student, and they're letting me do my own program that is, like they say, it's at the nexus of learning, design and technology and critical studies. And what that means is like intersectional studies, which means race, gender, ability, ethnicity, religion, the intersection of people's multiple identities. So that's where we're coming from. Oh, hey, Holly, hey. And I see some people who are here from like AECT. So AECT people, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to this. And if you're wondering what AECT is, it's not a really good acronym. It's like Association of Education, Communication, and Technology. But it's like this 100-year-old organization that really, if someone is teaching and doing research in instructional design, this is the conference and also the journals that you publish in. So want to say hi to people. Okay, so we will be moving. So we'll go ahead and move forward.
Definitely. And as we said, at any point in time, feel free to ask questions, interrupt us. This is a discussion, but as we said, we came prepared if people were feeling nonverbal this morning.
Yeah.
And we will focus on chat too. So you can also chat as well. Mm-hmm. So that's totally fine. So we begin our journey with learner analytics. And so it's really sort of like a background. We're sort of doing a big swath on a wide variety of things. So really where this whole thing about data started was learner analytics. The idea was, how do we check and how do we get better at really looking at how our students, how are our learners performing in our classes? And really where this sort of started, it started out with doing, anyone remember personal data assistants, PDAs? Before PDAs meant public displays of affection, we walk around with little different studies as far as Palm Pilots and things like that, where you could pull up your grades and you could actually look and see what your students were doing without having to consult your grade book. That's really sort of where we started to see this leveraging of technology to really sort of have student grades at a glance, that we could go ahead and we could really start trying to do more statistical analysis of what learners are doing. Then we got learning management systems. We got things that were just big databases that we could go ahead and put a lot of things into, that would track how students interacted with our content, that would track timing, that would log things. We could do split logs, we could do timestamps, we could look at the IP addresses. We could also do cookie profiling, something that sounds very tasty but is not. And then there's lots of things that we could play around with, that this gave us more data to play with, if you could get this data from your LMS. And then we sort of saw this evolution. So some of us, probably most of us, have been around long enough to see this evolution of the learning management system. So quick quiz. What do we think? Does anyone know what possibly could be the first learning management system? When do you think the first LMS was created? Okay, you are muted.
Okay, I do not know what the first LMS is. Sorry. We have an answer from Holly Sakai.
There's a WebCT.
And they have a date, so.
We have a date too. Well, they're looking at the timeline.
Okay. I didn't know I could cheat. Okay.
You could cheat. It's totally fine.
No, it's not cheating.
Cheating is acceptable. So is Googling. Or DuckDuckGoing. So the first alleged teaching machine is the teaching machine, which is in 1924, was allegedly the first LMS out there, by Sidney Pressey. Exactly. Now, do I think they're stretching, this author of this article was stretching what an LMS is? Yeah, I think they might be. But the first one we'd actually recognize today, yes, is going to be WebCTE, which has now, as we know, has been aggregated into a conglomerate known as Blackboard now. So there are lots and lots of these LMSs that are propagated and built and moved forward. And you can see this wonderful, wonderful slide here from Phil Hill. Really shows sort of this evolution of the landscape for LMSs. And so this has really sort of paved the way to gathering all this data, because there's all these LMSs are really large databases that allow us to go ahead and gather data on our students, because it tracks the students. As soon as they log in, boom, we've got data on what students are doing. The challenge is how to access that data, what to use it. The goal is this very lofty goal that we want to do predictive analytics. We want to go ahead and say, and how can we leverage this technology and leverage this use to really help our students do the best they possibly can? How can we help them achieve faster, better, get those, make them stronger, better, faster? It's basically making super students. How can we make their life easier as students and make them better students and really help them succeed in their academic and career aspirations? That's really one of the big things that we're looking at, what we're trying to do. And that's really sort of been the big push for predictive analytics. And just with a quick a Y or N in the chat, how many of you have been pitched predictive analytic packages from various different groups? So Y for yes or N for no. Feel free to type that in the chat. Not a whole lot. Interesting. There we go. Some people. There might be a delayed response. There we go.
Yeah, Mark says,
well done, Mark. Well played. Yes. This hour.
and it really depends on what what exactly you do. Are you an LMS coordinator? Are you an instructional designer? Are you, say, an online student success coach? Mm-hmm. All different platforms. All these different kinds of platforms are being pitched. And at the root of all of these, and you might be getting into it soon, Chris, is an algorithm. Okay. It is a proprietary algorithm that the companies that are giving you the sales pitch won't tell you exactly how they decide on these predictive analytics.
So the question was, how many of you have been pitched a predictive analytic package? And the thing about it is that when we've been talking about LMSs, I was kind of setting you up, because it's not just LMSs anymore. It's early alert systems now have predictive analytic packages to them. Also, you're seeing the expansion into SMSs, you're seeing apps, you're seeing even guidebooks now are also doing a lot of this data collection and being able to pull a lot of this data. And really what's happening is we've all been hearing about this idea of big data, this big evil word. It's big. It's got the word big in it, so it must be bad. It's big data. Or it must be good because it's big data.
Well, I'm going to stop you for a second.
And it's all in caps.
And Chris, I'm going to stop you because I happen to know in your doctoral program, you specifically took a course on big data. Isn't that correct?
I did.
So explain what your PhD level course taught you about big data.
Well, what it taught me was actually good transition. Concerns about data is what it showed me, because this is the book I went ahead and took the class on. So this is a really good book, Haringa, West, and Berglund. For any of you who love methodology and who really want to get into talking about data sets and really getting into it. Sorry, Kate, you sent me down this path. It's all your fault. So you go ahead and really, this is looking at design validity. This is looking at measurement validity, looking at student use validity. This is really looking at how are we setting up these data sets? How are we filtering the data? How is the data actually collected? And also, what's not being collected. When you look at data sets and how different groups are creating and collecting data for primary, we're talking about primary source data. So this is data collected for a specific purpose. So this could be a research project. So maybe it's a National Health Organization. Maybe it is USDA or a government organization or a state organization. You have to really look at what was the methodology, and look at their method and see, did they use weighting? If they use weighting, how are you backing out that weighting? You're looking at all these different things that are going on, because if you ignore all of that, then you are, because really very few of the data sets that are out there are what we'd call censuses. They're not a full gathering, a full collection of data on everybody who's within a certain population. They're usually extrapolations of a sample size. So they will survey 1,000 people and then they'll extrapolate that based on population. Now, with your LMS, it's a little different. Your LMS is all of your students. It's 100% of the students that logged in to your LMS for the time that they logged into your LMS. So those are things that's a little bit different. But this class I took was focusing on more public data sets that we're looking at, and looking at the issues that come with validity. And the same thing applies for looking at our data sets and looking at, are we asking the questions? Are we asking questions that we should be asking? Are we asking the right questions? And then do we actually have the data to answer those questions? Because a lot of times the data we get and the answers we get, they're the start of the conversation. They just show us that something's happening, but they don't tell us the why. They don't give us that deeper in-depth idea of why student behavior is happening this way, and we need to jump into it a little further. Other concerns, passive data collection. So the idea is that what's going on is all this is passive. Like in the past, we had to actively collect data. We had to go ahead and put a survey in front of our students. Our students could decide whether or not they wanted to fill out our surveys, our evaluation, their instructors, and they could decide whether they want to turn in. With passive data collection, a lot of times our students don't really understand that their data is being collected when they log into the LMS. They don't understand that their data is being collected when they log into their course, when they log into their e-text. They don't understand when that their data is being collected when they even log into their college website. So there's lots of things, this passive data collection, which is starting to become an issue.
And I want to use an example here. I'm going to use an example from Chris. Like Netflix thinks that Chris is a teenage Korean girl, okay? And it's because he shares his Netflix account with someone else, okay? And and so because of that, you know, when it comes to harvesting our data passively, you know, this is who they think I am. Well, what if you're sharing an account with somebody? Or
Exactly.
yes, an 85-year-old British man. Exactly. They think Chris is a teenage Korean girl. And how do I know this? Because Chris, when they get really ridiculous, Chris will forward me an email that he has received from Netflix on what their recommendation is that he should watch next. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We share things.
Exactly, like you share things, and that's the great point, is that a lot of the companies are starting to crack down on this, actually, about sharing your subscriptions and sharing your accounts, because they don't want to have that data commingling. They want specific data to an individual about specific likes and dislikes. And then we start getting into the whole issues and concerns about data harvesting, about what control do we have over the data and how it's harvested and how it's used. The obvious one here is the ones right at the very top: Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. That was in the news, so that's the top of mind for most folks whenever they think about data harvesting, because it was talked a lot about. There was a lot of headlines about this goal of data harvesting. The fact is, we've done data harvesting forever. It's just simply it's collecting your data. It's another word for collecting your data, using the data, and then starting to go ahead and move forward. And these are a lot of the different brands that are there. But you start seeing brands there that look familiar to some of us in education. Like most of us, Facebook, yeah, we're familiar with that. Cambridge Analytica, we weren't really familiar with that until it hit the news. Oracle, some of you may be familiar with Oracle from if you're on the database side, or if you're on PeopleSoft side, because you cursed Oracle. Cognos, I think a lot of us in education are familiar with Cognos. Tableau has come onto the scene. Cengage, I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. Wiley, Pearson, McGraw-Hill, these are all now technology service providers. They all now provide electronic services. They all now are providing databases that our students are hopping into as they jump in. And then we also see popular media has jumped in as well. We start seeing researchers and academics have started to look into this world of data collection and moving through. So you started seeing, like, you see Safiya Noble's book about algorithms of oppression. And this started looking at, the first thing, we started looking at search engines. And all proprietary algorithms, systems, and processes used by our vendors biased. Remember, these are proprietary, so we'll never get to see them. We only get to see their output. We don't necessarily ever get to see what causes them to go ahead and get the results that they get. They get.
And the only reason that companies have algorithms is because they've taken data on us from somewhere and us. It could be very exclusive, us, but they've taken data from people and have decided that there is a pattern and that they can make a prediction, and that then they set up an algorithm that uses that prediction.
Exactly, and this is all aggregate pieces. So the other thing you're looking at is there errors in the aggregate. So whenever you're merging databases together, you can have errors, you can have overwrites, you can have missorts, you can have bad cleaning techniques, and this could bias the data, this could change the data, this could move things around. The other thing we have to think about is, how do we protect students from unintended outcomes that end up being harmful? There's lots of examples in the past of unanticipated consequences. And the other thing about it is, are there equity gaps in our LMS? Those are things that are now coming out more and more as we explore these spaces. And these are just various concerns we're seeing from the academic community. And we talked about algorithms before. For those of you who algorithms are a new term for you, there's just simply instructions that direct a computer to carry out a function or task. They're typically built around and, or, and not logics. So they're just code. They tell the computer exactly what to do. They tell the program what to do. And they're just built around those arguments. So this or this, not this.
So think about when it comes to something like an early alert system. If you don't know what they're using, it could be something like, is this the student's first semester? the next thing that could be added to an algorithm could be something like, have they logged into the LMS yet? And while depending on the institution you're at, when it comes to anything about underserved, about the only thing that might show up in the algorithm might be whether they're Perkins eligible or not. And that is a real problem that happens with a lot of the algorithms, that they might come from a deficit mindset that either overcompensates or under reports our students who are normally underserved. Okay, so Sophie's asking, what are you proposing the change should be versus what is likely? Oh, I can tell you this already. I think that we should question analytics. We should question early alert systems. If somebody's talking to a vendor for an early alert system, while they won't share that algorithm, we should press them for what that algorithm is and go into as much detail. And I will tell you, at our institutions, these decisions are usually made by a very limited amount of people. And the people who are usually making those decisions are usually people who are focused on efficiency and cost, and are not usually the DEI representatives for your institutions. And that's what I think. I think that there should be somebody representing the students, and I don't mean the student government president, and that there should be somebody in there who is coming from your equity or your diversity, equity, and inclusion office, to actually be able to know what's going on here. So it made me jump, but that's my answer.
And I think the other thing is it's also learning more yourself. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing you see is, if you're a faculty member, it's learning about the technology
Mm-hmm.
that you're using, and asking those questions, getting informed about what questions you want to ask.
And,
Go
and
ahead.
I was just going to say, for an example, one of our English professors, who, when we did an early alert system that would show up like a red on the student grade book if they were dropping below a grade, she teaches at this point in time. She's teaching without grades, so she's teaching a composition studio that does not assign grades. She felt it would be very detrimental and disheartening to any student who showed up as red or yellow rather than the good to go green. And because she teaches at a community college where students, a lot of them, this is their second, third, fourth chance, or their first generation, that was totally disheartening. So the next thing we're slipping into, do you want me to take this one, or is this one yours?
Oh, we have another question of, how do you weave this into your instruction in courses? What is the level of data privacy your students are receiving through your classes? And the thing is, it's varied. For the most part, your students are protected through FERPA, and that is standard across all universities. For K-12, you get into COPA and those apparent things, but you have issues sometimes because you have inexperienced people, especially at K-12 level. They're not necessarily they're wearing lots of different hats, and in some districts they do not have the ability to afford, they don't have the resources to afford someone who is trained professionally in IT and to know exactly how to turn the permissions and the rights the correct way. There's lots of issues that have happened in K-12 about data breaches, where they've allowed student data to be just publicly available to people who logged onto the site. So there's just different areas there. Unfortunately, at the university level, typically a lot of the universities are catching on to these concerns. But there's still new concerns always popping up, and you'll talk this a little bit about some of the things going on with Proctorio and some of the other proctoring services. But those are things that really been addressed a whole lot.
And I will say, most of the time the decisions are made I will say that there's usually a committee, it's usually IT and maybe a couple of people from an online learning office or an LMS administrator. Students aren't involved in it, and students don't have the option not to be part of it. Students are, Chris, do you want to put on the PhD area you're studying in
Sure.
and say exactly the verbiage about the assumption that, so Chris says it really well.
Yeah.
So say the assumption.
So pretty much with the students, there's the assumption the students that you right now, colleges and universities have the benefit of the doubt that students assume that you're not going to use their data poorly. They're not as generous with their look at corporate America. Now, the thing is that we rely on FERPA. So we rely on FERPA as our guide. You know, as colleges and universities, we rely on FERPA as our guide when it comes to data protections. You're seeing the GDPR. This is the EU data protection rights that were passed a year or so ago. That has changed things a little bit for universities to take this more seriously. But the challenge is we still predominantly rely on FERPA. Now, the thing is that we don't really pay attention to FERPA. And what happened during several presidencies ago is FERPA's definition of the third-party vendor was expanded. So what happened is the FERPA was expanded to allow more data to be shared with our third party. And that was done at the federal level. So those are things that that we're seeing is these definitions are changing, our rules are changing, and so we're having to stay. It's becoming more and more on the onus of the individual, much like a lot of things in our complex society. It's becoming more and more the onus of the individual to become more educated about matters that concern them. And this is just one of the things that really spurred this discussion, is because data privacy, these are things that we're getting interested in from our studies, as well as some personal interest, and so that's what we're seeing here. So that's actually a very hard question to answer, Zovia, because the floor is always moving, because historically it's been FERPA. FERPA is our ironclad agreement to protect student data. The challenge is what happens whenever FERPA moves.
And I was going to say, let me jump in. And I will name the administration. The Obama administration allowed for third-party vendors to get a lot more information as long as it was disaggregated. And for those third-party vendors to be able to use our students' data as part of their business plan and part of their business model. So think about Turnitin.com. Okay, think about the business model of Turnitin.com. What, if schools weren't willing to share students' papers, there would be no business there for Turnitin.com. Okay, now I know the effect, the efficiency that Turnitin.com affords, but and that's what we need to think about when it comes to data rights, data privacy, data justice, is giving our students information is it worth the efficiency? Do our students have intellectual property rights to what they produce? Do they give away those property rights when they come to our college? Does being admitted mean that they no longer have intellectual property rights? Does it mean that they give up all their data privacy rights, and that we
and for most institutions, the answer to that is yes. If
you
accept admission, once you're enrolled, you've accepted that you grant access to all of your information.
Yeah, all your data that the institution knows best on what to do with your data, and you've given away those rights. So these were some of the questions. Like, we do book clubs, and we've done book, and that's one of the books. But these are some of the questions. What happens to our students' data that's stored outside our institution? I mean, do our students know? Do you know? What about proctoring? And this has come up specifically a lot in the last year, is proctoring. You know, here, for example, do all our students have privacy screens? You know, like, you don't get to see what's behind there. I'll tell you what it is. This is my living room. That's the kitchen. But here's the thing. Do our students have that? If our students are taking online classes because they have no other option, you know, do they want to have their kids behind there? You know, if their kids are having to come into the kitchen, do they want that being shown? And quite honestly, with some of the Proctorio and some of the other Proctor things, they will get flagged if somebody has to walk behind them. And that is a big middle class assumption that you are living in a place that allows you to have a room that no one else is ever going to walk in. That's a big class assumption there. Okay. And should our students be able to opt out of technology? What are the alternatives? And you can move forward, Chris.
Sure.
And then there's also the Fourth Amendment, right? You know, that we'll be talking more about. But the Internet of Things, if there's sensors involved, these sensors, track everything. So if your students are doing, if you're getting into technology that's a little more like augmented reality, or you're having your students deal with anything that has sensors, and there's a lot of workplaces that have things with sensors. So if you're doing career technical education, you might be doing something that has sensors. You know, what are student rights? And we're taking a US centric view, but we'll try to cover some other areas too.
And that's one of the key things is definitely one of the takeaways is have alternatives. If you're picking a technology and what you're doing is dependent upon technology, definitely make sure you have alternatives. Because what you're seeing is, again, you're seeing more and more of these potential unease between the education side and our partners, our corporate partners. And you're seeing this piece, and we've already sort of talked about FERPA and that, so skip that. We talked about the EU GDPR. This is the regulations there, but don't think it's just in Europe, because what this required is that every university and anywhere in the world that has a student from the EU, a citizen from the EU taking classes, has to abide by the EU GDPR. That means you have to have a data officer who is responsible, who is the reporting person who's responsible for controlling all of your data policies. So that way, what that really means is, if you violate that student's rights based on the GDPR, that's the person that gets named in the lawsuit along with the university to get sued. So the thing is that that's not just in Europe anymore, because California passed their own version of the law, and there's many other states that are currently starting to do the same thing about how do you protect the rights of their citizen.
And the other thing I was going to say really quickly, like you're going, oh, well, who's going to say from the Europe? Here's what's going to happen. At some point, if there's lots of violations and lots of complaints, your university or state will end up being listed as somewhere as an institution that is not friendly for students for the EU. And depending on what kind of organization you're in, that might be a teensy bit of your population, or it might be a good chunk of your population. I mean, it might be your growth area. Okay, so Chris, let's go forward, and let's move
really a lot of these concerns fall under this topic. And so this is the topic that that we use in our title. This is the topic of data justice. This is the concept of fairness in the way people are made visible, represented, treated as a result of their production of digital data. This is from Taylor 2017. And so really these are the three pillars: invisibility and visibility, disengagement and engagement technology, and anti-discrimination. So this is really the core construct that a lot of these concerns we laid out earlier fall under this pattern of data justice.
And rather than saying the terms data management or data privacy, we go to the point that we think it's a right. So it is data justice. And Chris, we're gonna have to go fast. Okay, so some of the things, this visibility or invisibility, the point of this, that in the US, this is about people who are not white. Okay, who are not represented. It's also oftentimes it can be gender. It can be studies and things where women are not represented. So when it comes to the data, it's these studies and fundings and uses and policies, and it's really, is everybody being represented? And can people, if they don't want to be in your data, can they not? And Europe does have the right to oblivion, or the right to be forgotten. So Europe, when we're looking at digital rights, Europe is a really good place to look at for what they're at least doing with the EU. And Chris, I think we've got to go faster. Okay, we would like to recommend to people who are interested this report on our data bodies. And Crystal put it in there. It is an excellent report to look at people who have been not counted. And specifically, this focuses at the intersectionality of gender and race, and specifically on Black women. But it is a report that really talks about data justice and what happens when you're excluded or when you're included, but for the wrong reasons. Okay, Chris, keep going. This is a great conference, Data for Black Lives. It's between Harvard and MIT, and they do it every 2 years. And they are great, and they live stream everything. Also, you can just look for Data for Black Lives. You can find a lot of great resources and videos that discuss race and gender and data.
And I'm looking at Sophia's comment, and actually, Sophia, one of the core constructs of the data protections is any data, including images, that could be used to identify the individual is protected by that protocol. So yes, I wouldn't be surprised that someone would be like, you did not get my permission to take my picture, therefore, I don't know why you're taking my picture for. So I can see someone who is very passionate about protecting their data, not being very, very happy that someone snapped their picture.
I will also tell you, along with our Data Bodies report, a digital defense playbook, and it is about reclaiming your data and communities using data for how they want to, rather than being in somebody else's research report. Okay, now another area to look for data, and that has been a problem in the US and also Canada, is murdered and missing Indigenous women. Now, this became a data justice issue because law enforcement was not counting women who were missing and murdered as the kind of crimes that were actually happening. They were not reporting data to each other, they were not tracking it, and they were not following it. So this has been an activist movement in Canada and also in the United States. It wasn't until, I think, October of last year, 2020, that finally it's called Savannas Law. And it actually requires, it's a federal law, but it requires law enforcement to track Indigenous people who are missing or murdered, and to also put their gender in there, and to share information about this, so that this isn't a silent crisis. So just wanted to give you another example there. Now, another place where these digital justice and digital rights come out is, sure, we have students for 2 years or 4 years, or maybe even longer if they're going to graduate school. But think about it. We take a lot of their digital rights away. We say, no, you have to use this technology. No, I'm sorry, you have to fill out this form. We don't say, hey, here are all the places that we're sending your data to. We are sharing it with this company that then shares it with this company. And then I'm going to give the example of D2L. D2L takes your data and then uses your data to improve their product, but they're not paying you anything for it. And, in fact, your tuition's going up because we have to buy this expensive LMS. And then, D2L has the data, and D2L can share that data with that aggregate data with whatever partners they want to do whatever side ventures or businesses and things like that. And so that's from the student side. But then think about when they become workers. If we don't teach them about digital rights, what kind of say are they going to have when they're workers? Because think about this, these things, and this is from Uni Global, and Uni Global is a global labor union, and it's the quite honestly the only global union that is focusing on worker digital rights. But think about this, just sub in students for this. Access and influence over the data collected on them. There should be data processing safeguards. Data minimization principle must apply, meaning you're not collecting everything, that there's specific reasons. Data processing must be transparent. Privacy laws. If your data is being used, you have a right to a full explanation. So for workers, that's like, oh, are you getting a promotion? But students, are we explaining to students why they're getting that early alert and how their data is being collected there? Biometric and personally identify, are we tracking them? And, is there a data governance body at your institution that includes students so students can know what's going on? So we just put and this is from my PhD, and yes, I'm taking political science courses too, and one of them was on rights. Okay, so continue on.
Yeah, we're going to jump around because, as we said, we have lots of slides. So
okay,
so disengagement with technology. This is really getting into the ability of students to opt out. And Linkletter versus Proctorio is a great example of that. This is really sort of looking at what's going on with how much, what happened was the instructor, Linkletter, went ahead and shared videos from Proctorio.
Instructional technology.
Yes, sorry, okay. Learning technologist specialist.
Yeah.
And what happened is the videos he shared were from Proctorio. They were for training for faculty and instructional technologists. They were not meant for students, and he went ahead and put them out on Twitter. And then Proctorio sued them. That's the basis of Proctorio's lawsuit. And basically, the Linkletter was using it to continue his focus on bringing out issues about privacy and issues about talking about how different glitches and different things like that with proctoring services weren't meeting the needs of the students.
And then this we're just gonna throw out, because this is a friend of ours teaches high school in Texas. On Tuesday, 4th graders, 7th graders, sophomores, and freshmen were all taking an English/reading test. For the high schoolers, it's a test they need to pass to graduate in Texas. And the system was ETS. They started the exam, and at 9:05, an error popped up on everyone's screen across Texas. Because of how high stakes the testing was, the students weren't allowed to leave their computer desk. They weren't allowed to talk. They weren't allowed to pull out anything to read. And in the state of Texas, all the students had to wait until 11:30 when the Texas Education Association contacted everyone, all the different schools, and said that they were stopping the test and they would have to now take it today on Thursday. But think about it. Think about how we're training our students to believe that they have no agency when it comes to technology, when it comes to testing, when it comes to data. I mean, at some point, at least in higher ed, we need to start teaching our students that they do.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing about it. Is the other thing we see is we're seeing it now with the pandemic, and the common response that we see with students is an assumption that they can have access to better Wi-Fi.
Mm.
And a lot of our students do not have access to better Wi-Fi. That's the Wi-Fi that they have. And so those are some different things that we're seeing. So we're going to go ahead and let me exit full screen. And
so
jump
Chris
down
is moving forward.
to our
Okay,
next
so
major one.
real quickly. So some
And
terms
Chris,
of
you have 5 minutes left.
Yep,
we'll go fast. Okay, some terms beside data justice, data sovereignty. Okay, that people is the autonomy of people in their roles as employees, consumers, and users. That people should have digital sovereignty, that they should make decisions about their data, how they're represented, things like that. The next one, and sorry, this was a slide that he did for my professor. He speaks German, so I you know, so do I. So Datenbewusstsein. Okay, critical consciousness of how your data is being used. This is actually being put out by the German government, that this is something that citizens should know about. So go quick, Chris. Data protection. This is from a union. It's one of the up and comer unions in the UK that deals a lot with the gig economy, and they're coming out straight out and telling their members, this is how we use it. This is what we gather. And if you want to opt out, or if you have questions, let us know. These are things we should be doing for our students. Our students don't get this. Okay, keep going, Chris. Oh, yeah, you can go past this. We don't need to do that. Keep going. Okay, do you know that Microsoft Teams really tracks what we're doing? Now, it might not be on your institution, but go ahead and click, Chris.
I was gonna say, we told people we had lots of slides.
Okay,
so.
you can go, but and this was this isn't Microsoft, but this is the Indian government, and the Indian government required everyone to go ahead and track. But okay, so this is, again, this is from my paper, but anyway, and this was just some of the types of things. Microsoft Office metrics, emails you send per hour, your external network size, generated workload, multitasking meeting, diverse tie scored. Okay, so analytics are showing up everywhere. And again, shouldn't we be teaching our students to ask how they're being tracked, and to be able to opt out of being tracked and things like that? And since we only have 3 minutes, why don't we take questions or comments? I know we're in time most days.
I don't know. That might affect your interaction score.
Yeah, it might. So
we'll stop the fire hosing, and we'll go ahead
and fire hosing is our style. Sorry about that, but we hoped you got something. We hope you got something from this, and even if it's just a couple new vocabulary words, like I know when I talk to people at AECT, and after I was able from the research to pull out the word digital sovereignty, the other people I know who are interested in went, oh, digital sovereignty, you're right, that's a term I can use. People should have. And Raul, you always raise your hand, and if you were in my class, I'd be like, stop raising your hand, just stop.
I figure if I raise my hand enough, the teacher would stop calling on me and calling somebody else instead.
Oh, okay.
But I do have a comment.
Mm-hmm.
It relates to the use of video and the image of the student, which is something that you guys brought up earlier. Certainly in the last year, due to the pandemic, there's been a lot of Zoom usage in the classroom with distance learning, and teachers, by and large, record these sessions and then want to share them with very little thought as to how they're sharing it and how publicly or privately those videos are being shared. I like to point out that, broadly speaking, the image the name of the student, the voice of the student, and early on, if someone dialed into a Zoom call, into a Zoom meeting with their phone number would show up as well. And so their phone number is all protected data. And when we tell teachers this, the broad reaction we get is, well, you're just making things harder for me. And if we talk to them about how there are methods for you to share this content in secure ways, it's like, oh, too many hurdles. I'm going to just go find a different system that doesn't give me all these hurdles. And that is an unfortunate reaction. It's simply not the right way. We try to make things as simple and easy and as unobtrusive as possible, but we need to work within the parameters of the privacy of the students. And this is, I mean, it's not like you didn't go through your FERPA training. It's not like you've never heard of these things. It's just that they can't make the correlation between what they have been told and what the reality on the ground is. And that is proving to be very frustrating in a number of scenarios.
Oh, I agree. And I think the discussion you have to have with them is they have to put the student first, because all the scenario you were saying, the voice, the picture, the phone, I will tell you, since I'm at a community college and community colleges have very broad services, you could easily have a woman in your class who is a victim of domestic violence, who does not want to put up her picture there, and who does not want to put their name there, and definitely not have that phone number come across. And why should that victim, and a victim of any kind of crime, need to identify themselves in that way? I mean, when it comes to it, if I know the conversations you're talking about, I think we have to stop thinking about the individual conversations, and we have to start thinking about, how do we change this culture? How do we change the culture that and I'm sorry, it's peer pressure, that if this person is going to whine about protecting students, that the rest of their peers will let them know that that's not acceptable, because we protect students. Yeah. This.
Also, Kay has a keynote she has to go moderate.
Oh my gosh! Right, okay, goodbye. So... Bye, everybody. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.